Welcome to another edition of Dish It Out. I'm Frank Benowitz, and with me, a man who needs no introduction, but he's going to get one anyway, Chef Doug Fee. Chef, what are we going to be eating today? I see here, unlike the crack pots that are sometimes around here, including myself, we have all these crock pots here. What the heck is going on?
Well, actually, we're going to be talking about something chefs have been doing for a long time, which is braising, and the way you can do it at home. Most of us have a crock pot at home, and we're going to show you how to utilize it successfully and how to do some variations on some recipes. We're going to start off today with a straightforward Hungarian goulash style recipe.
Sounds great.
Which is a good standard recipe. And then we're going to go back and look at the various segments of our recipe and change them out and see how we want to make it so it's the way we want to have our goulash. So not necessarily your mother's goulash or the recipe book's goulash, but your own.
Chance for some educational teaching moments, correct?
Exactly. And then we'll talk about the different ways that how braising is very similar with crock pot cooking. And we're going to show you how to finish off your dishes when you get home at the end of the day. You come home, you open up the lid and say, oh, what do we have for dinner? You can smell it. And we're going to show you how to finish it off and bring that crock pot meal up to the next level so it's something your family will say, well, that was really terrific tonight, which everyone likes to hear.
And I'm sure before we conclude today, what would a segment of Dish It Out be without a segment of Ask Frank, speaking of educational moments?
Absolutely. So we'll be asking Frank something later on in the segment. So welcome to Dish It Out here at our beautiful facilities at Mercer County Community College, our culinary center here. So let's start cooking.
I heard about this company dumping toxins in local rivers, and I called their executives to say stop. But they were too busy counting profits while the rivers are being destroyed, birds and fish are dying, and the local kids are getting cancer. So I organized a huge protest, and we actually got the company shut down. But now half the town's unemployed, and the kids are twice as sick since they can't get health care, since their parents lost the insurance they had when they worked for the company who dumped all the toxins in the first place.
When I connect these wires, the electricity is going to cause the eruption. Very good.
If you're not helping after-school programs, you're really helping to take them away. After-school programs, wouldn't you rather be helping?
All right, Doug, it's time to see your goulash skills. So how are we going to get started?
Okay, I've been goulashing for quite a few years now. So what we're going to do is get our pan hot, and we're going to start following this recipe. This one actually called for shortening.
Shortening?
Shortening.
My goodness, that's as old of a recipe as your crock pot there, I'm guessing.
It's been around for a while. All right, so we're going to let our shortening melt into here, and we want to make sure that our pan is hot enough, which looks like it is. Now, a common mistake people make, I got to talk over the sizzle here.
I'm telling you, it's all that shortening.
Common mistake is to add too much meat and overload the pan. We're just going to stir this on up.
That's cooking very quick for you. I thought this goulash was a slow cook meal.
Eventually it's going to be slow cook. Just start off stirring a little quickly to make sure nothing burns here on it. Okay.
This is where the smell-o-vision comes in handy, right?
Exactly. So as long as I'm working here, why don't you get to work and we'll slice our onion.
Okay.
It calls for our pan nice and hot. And what happens is the pan starts to cool a little bit from the meat being cooler. And now we want to be able to bring it back up to a nice simmer here. We still hear some sizzling going on there. But we want to get it browned. So that's the point of this step. So we turn it back up. The thicker your pan, the more it's going to hold the heat. So sometimes what happens with this is people get it too hot, and they turn it down, but it's already too late. So we brown this off.
Plenty of meat juices there. Are you ready for your onion, or are you holding off for a second?
You know, I think we're going to take our meat. We're going to put this into our crock pot here.
Oh, right into the crock pot. I see we're using a little more modern of a crock pot for this one.
Just for you, Frank.
Oh, thank you.
All right, we're going to add a little bit more shortening here so our onions don't stick. I did say little, didn't I?
A little bit of shortening.
Okay, have our nicely sliced onions in here. Oh, one trying to get away. All right, we're going to simmer those off just a bit. We're going to add a cup and a half of water here.
Would that be regular water?
As opposed to irregular, yes. A cup of regular water in here.
It's West Windsor's finest.
All right. And now into, this is nice, sweetening up our onions a bit here. Now into our crock pot, we're going to add, escapee here. We have some chopped garlic. We're going to add this in for just a minute, just to get a little bit of flavor out of it.
Yeah, 'cause the pan's pretty hot there, right?
Right, and once you smell the garlic, it's done, especially when it's minced like that. So we don't want it to burn. So this goes into our crock pot.
And at this point, would you have the crock pot on yet, or you'd wait until all your ingredients are in there?
Actually, I know it's a slow cooker, but I preheat my crock pot.
Really?
I want it to get hot because if I'm doing a crock pot meal, it's probably because I need to get it together and get out of the house and it's going as quickly as I can.
So what setting would you put that in? The lowest or the highest?
I put it on the highest to start off with.
Okay.
And depending on how long I'm going to be gone for the day, it'll be on medium, low, or high. So if I'm going to be gone for a long day, I'm going to keep it on low. This way it cooks a little more slowly, so I don't come home to all my meat falling apart, and it's more like a meat sauce as opposed to goulash.
So basically you adjust it based upon how long you're going to be away from the house.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Exactly. So now we're going to add in, this is the cayenne. Just a pinch cayenne. To that.
That was a very small amount.
Well, we have our salt, a little dry mustard, and a little sweetness to it. Sugar.
Oh, you know what I like.
And our paprika to give it that real goulash flavor.
Gotta
color.
have the paprika and the goulash. I mean.
And Worcestershire sauce. What's this here sauce? Add that in. And then, of course, ketchup, a tomato product. And stir this.
Nice flavor base for that goulash there.
It really is. We have all the building blocks we need to make a nice product. And it doesn't look like much yet. But when you come home, after working all day, open the lid. That's still hot. It's going to be. You're going to have all the flavors and smells. You're going to be able to smell it, and it's going to make you hungry.
So really, it took you very little time to put that together, and then the crock pot's going to do the rest of the work for us, right?
Exactly. So when we talk about something convenient to do, this is a very easy, convenient meal.
What is that thing?
Looks like somebody's double chin. Must have lost it snacking on fruits and vegetables.
Somebody's gonna trip on that.
I'm a lion!
Yes, you are. Come here. Let's see how this looks.
Hey, how's my little horse?
She's a lion.
Yes, she is.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. When you adopt a child from foster care, just being there makes all the difference.
Welcome to another edition of Ask Frank. I hope you're not asking your neighbor anymore, because I'm right here. Well, I'm not actually your neighbor, but I'm Frank. So for this segment, what we're going to talk about is a question that's often asked, and that's regarding flavored oils and vinegars. So right here we have some beautiful rosemary, and when we get into the spring and summer and fall months, we have a lot of fresh herbs around that we can use to infuse oil. The thing that you have to be careful about is a lot of people will just go ahead and take these stalks and boom, right into our oil. And of course they'd have a little more oil than that, right? And they'd bottle that up. Now the problem is if you're using a fresh herb, you really need to use that oil up within a week's time. You can use a dried herb to flavor and fuse that oil with the rosemary, but this fresh herb will have a moisture content, and that could lead to things like botulism. If you haven't heard of it, that's a good thing, because that could kill you. All right? So make sure that you're not using a fresh herb if you're going to bottle that up and give that as a gift for the holiday season. What I would suggest is sometimes I like to do, just to infuse that quickly if you're making a dish, say a poultry dish or something, and you want to go ahead and heat your oil up. Get that oil nice and hot. Now this is olive oil, which is most commonly used these days for infusing the oil. You just have to remember that if you're going to heat it like this to infuse it, that you don't heat it too high, because what will happen is the smoke point is much lower on an olive oil. So what I'll do is I'll just heat that up, warm it through, not let it get too hot. I don't want to fry anything. I don't want to especially deep fry with an olive oil where it'll start smoking on you. I just want to heat it up for a little while, maybe over a longer period of time, just to infuse that wonderful fresh rosemary flavor into my oil. Then again, just as I said before, when you're done with that, you really need to use that up rather quickly. It's not going to last for more than a week's time. So after I get that heated up, if you have the Magic TV there, hit your remote on pause while you're doing this. Let that heat up for probably a good 5-10 minutes or more. Give it a little taste, because remember, it's not rocket science, it's food. So when it gets to the taste that you like is when you can go ahead and pull this rosemary out. So let's pretend this was going for about 10 minutes so far. Then afterwards, I can just go ahead and strain this oil. Oh, turn that smell-o-vision on right now, because we got some beautiful rosemary infused oil. And then I can go ahead, you can see here, by pouring it into this clear container, not much color has changed. But even in that short amount of time, I have some wonderful rosemary flavor. And now this would create, for my dinner this evening, some beautiful rosemary infused oil so I can dip my bread in. So remember, when you're doing things, whether it be flavored oils and vinegars to give as a gift or for home use, if you have questions, don't ask your neighbor, ask Frank. You know what I wish? I wish that we had the ability to go back and see that all from the beginning, so that our viewing audience could do this step by step and be able to goulash at home.
Well, we could rewind to that point and start over. So why don't we do that?
That would be wonderful.
All right, we're going to start with a rewind. We're going to talk about the meats that we could use. When we're talking about working with a crock pot, it's slow cooking. Essentially, we're braising, which is something chefs have been doing for years and years. And which cuts of meat do you think we use for braising?
I'm going to take a guess, and I'm going to go with maybe something a little less expensive.
The cheap cuts. I'm a chef, I'm cheap. You know, if you be a great chef, but if you can't make money, you're in trouble. So these are cheaper cuts of meat, which can, if they're cooked properly, taste great. There's a lot of flavor in these cuts of meat. The more exercise the part of the animal, the more flavor, but the tougher it is. So it's a trade-off. So we have all this terrific flavor, and we want to utilize it in our recipe. What we used today in our recipe earlier, the recipe just called for beef, and which really doesn't give you a lot of directions. And a lot of your recipes are like that. It's kind of like a GPS. You ever plug in your GPS someplace where you know how to get there, and your GPS takes you way out of your way?
Absolutely.
Well, recipes are the same way. So it's like a GPS. You can follow along if you want, but you can go off and take some detours along the way, and that's what we're going to talk about in our rewind here.
Okay.
So let's look at our meats. We have a couple here. This is what we use, which is actually, we bought this at the market, and it was labeled as stew meat. And what kind of meat is it? Well, we're not really sure.
It's very small, though.
But some of the things that we're going to be looking at, it is how marbleized it is, how much fat's in between the different tissues of the muscle. It's going to give us a more tender product and a more flavorful product. Not a lot of marbling here, so if you look at something like round cubes you see all the time, not a great selection for a crock pot. This is just from a different provider, different store. This is their version of beef cubes, and you can see on these, some of these you'd have to trim up. You know, you got a little bit of fat there. You don't want to be chewing on that. Generally, as a rule of thumb, if it's yellow and kind of fatty, it's going to break down and add flavor. But if it's really tough, just cut it away. You don't want to be bothered with it. And you also want to make sure that your meat is actually bite-sized, so it fits on a fork or a spoon.
I was going to say there's some large piece of stew meat there.
Now, the cheapest of the cheap for me this week was, I like to use the chuck roast. And with the chuck, you can see the great marbling that's inside there. You can buy it. You can buy the chuck cubes sometimes, but that wasn't on sale this week, so I couldn't have that. So we bought the roast, and I just soon cut it up myself. And this way I get the size I want. It's trimmed up the way I like it to be, and it's a much better product. So we're going to cut this up for our rewind of our goulash.
Excellent.
So actually, I'm going to ask you to go to work on that.
Certainly. Beautiful
Start
cut of meat
slicing
there.
this
Yeah.
up.
And what would you like? What size would you like for your rewind there?
I think 7/8 inch cubes would be fine.
Let me get the ruler out.
And while you're doing that, I'm gonna show you two examples of how marbling works. So don't go
Okay.
away. Keep working.
I'll do that. As long as I get to eat afterwards, I'm okay with that.
All right. If you think of the strands of meat, like pasta or linguine, as being muscle tissue, and here pasta is much the same way. So what we want to do is enable it so it doesn't stick together. So if you don't have good marbling in your pasta, we'll look at this here. This pasta here doesn't have any fat. We didn't use anything to keep it from sticking to itself, and it kind of balls up.
It's a nice big clump of
Nice
pasta.
big clump. Whereas we have our other pasta here, so you have some fat there, doesn't stick together at all. All right, so marbling has the same effect on our meat. So when it doesn't stick together, it's a more tender product. We're also affected by that later on when we go to cut it up, and we'll talk about that in just a bit.
Okay, so fat is flavor and creates a natural lubricant, if you will.
It does all that and more. Now, the other things that you can work with, if you're working with a different recipe, if you're working with meats, for chicken, for example, I like to use the chicken thighs instead of the breasts. And this is where you ask, why would you do that?
Chicken thigh. I see some chicken thighs right there. Why would you do the chicken thighs as opposed to using beef? Beef is what's for dinner.
Well, if I have chicken on sale, I'm going with chicken.
Ah, see, I didn't even think about that.
What I like to do, though, I like to use the thighs instead of the breast meat. It's a more exercised part of the animal. This is the boneless, skinless. It was on sale, so that's why we got that. But it's also more forgiving. So if I cook this for a while, it's going to have enough fat in there. It's a more juicy product. So that in a crock pot, even though chicken breast is cooked in liquid, any fat that's in there is going to find its way out into the liquid, and you can end up with a dry product even though it's in the liquid. So the thighs are going to hold up much better, and these will cook 1.5 hours, 2-3 hours, depending on the setting on your crock pot. So it's up to you how fast you want to get that done. Now we have some beef ready to go, I see.
Absolutely.
So let's carefully put a little bit of clarified butter.
Now, before you use shortening,
I used shortening before. I actually want to use something with some flavor this time. Can't beat the flavor of butter.
that's what they tell me.
So that's what we're going to go with. Okay. A little sizzling in there. Now, clarified butter, of course, means that the milk solids and any impurities have been filtered out of there, separated out just naturally by letting it warm up. So we can go ahead and add our beef.
Okay. I think this one's going to be a much better dish, in my opinion. Oh, look, you had runaway mushrooms before I have runaway beef. How's the size on that? Is that okay for you?
That's perfect. All right. So now we talked before about the pan heating up a little too, cooling down a little bit too much. We may have to turn it up a little bit. We're going to have to watch make sure it doesn't overcook on us. So the next part of our recipe we looked into was the onions.
Okay.
And just call for onions. So there are all kinds of different onions that we can utilize. For our recipe now, typically you think of your standard Spanish onions. We also have over here our red onions, but if we look at our onion family, boy, we do have plenty to choose from here. We also threw in some peppers because, well, they look pretty and we wanted to.
I was going to ask how they joined the family there.
Well, you can't pick your families these days, so, if you end up with a couple of peppers in your onion family, that's the way life is.
That's all right.
But what we have here, we have scallions, we have leeks, red onions, and we have shallots. Shallots being a mixture, kind of a cross halfway between an onion and garlic. Fairly mellow flavor, but something a little bit different. And, when you make your decision for your recipe, which one are you going to use? Well, whichever one's in the house that you like best.
And, of course, whichever one is the most value-friendly as well, correct?
Definitely.
But shallots, when you're buying shallots or leeks or something, they're generally around the same pricing. So to get some shallots, personally, is the way I like to go myself.
Now, if we wanted to, anywhere I see onions, sometimes I'm thinking pepper. So it's a natural transition, depending on how much heat you like, and we know how much heat I like. Not a lot.
Just a little.
Just a little. So we have peppers in here. Now, if we wanted to make these peppers even sweeter, we could roast these peppers, which would caramelize the sugars that are naturally present, and add a little different twist of flavor to our dish.
So basically, as you're taking us back with this dish, it's in essence the same dish. As you said with the GPS, it started the same, but the direction you're taking by adding your peppers or your shallots or leeks or anything you like, you're actually changing the end result.
Exactly. You're customizing it, the recipe, to your taste. Just because it's in the book doesn't mean you can't veer off the path a little bit.
But the end result is going to go into our crock pot again. So it's basically just as easy.
Exactly. Now, one of the things we didn't talk about is the size of the meats besides what we cut up here.
Okay.
If I wanted to do a chuck roast and braise that, I could do that. I could use that whole large piece of meat there and do exactly what I'm doing here. I don't have to turn it once instead of moving it around the pan. But if I wanted to do this type of recipe, I can do this well in advance, like the night before, because I'm going to actually cook through my meat in the pan, so then I can cool it off. So the next day, I have a little pouch ready to go, so that.
So let me rewind you real quickly. So you actually did this the day ahead of time?
Day ahead of time.
So you had it all ready just to pour into your crock pot?
Right. So before I go to work, I dump that in my crock pot, and I'm ready to go.
It doesn't get much easier than that, right?
Exactly. Now, if I'm using a large roast like that, I can't cook it all the way through. Once I start the cooking process, I don't want to stop in the middle. But I want to make sure that I can cool it, then I can add the rest of my ingredients and refrigerate it the next day. Dump it in the crock pot, and you're good to go.
Okay, so when you're cooking for your family, you'll have cooked this the night before, make it nice and easy, and then when you know I'm coming for dinner, you can grab that whole piece in and make that fresh to order.
You said you were coming to dinner.
Oh, jeez, I tell you.
All right, we're gonna
squeak one in there.
We're gonna add in our beef cubes now. Just like before, we're gonna cook off our onions. I'm gonna use red onions this time. Why? Because I had half a red onion hanging out, so we're gonna put that in there.
I remember that from one of the episodes. That was a pantry raid that using the leftovers.
Exactly.
So now you have a mixture of onions.
I like all the pretty colors here. Now, as long as there's enough fat still in the pan, I don't have to add more clarified butter here. I shake it up and it's still moving around, we're good. Now we see that brown stuff sticking to the pan. Lots of flavor there. Now in the previous recipe, it didn't call for us to do anything there. What we're going to do this time is we're going to deglaze the pan. We're going to lift that's called the fond up from the bottom of the pan, and it's going to give us some great flavor.
And what are you going to deglaze that with?
Well, actually,
water, or are you going to use something different?
I could use water, but I have here I have some dry sherry. I have a burgundy and a port, and I think I'm going to go with the burgundy.
That'll add some great flavor to your goulash there, right?
Now, if it's anything high test, you're going to want to pull it off the flame so you don't set fire to the microwave if it's right above your stove.
Yes.
We're going to pour it into the back of our pan here. Just tilt it forward. There we go.
That's the low octane version.
Low octane. We didn't get a flame there, which is fine. We didn't need one. We just needed enough liquid in the pan to lift up all those good bits of flavor off the pan. You see, it's self-cleaning, so it makes your pan easier to clean too. So
it's getting even easier.
So we'll just let that cook out just a bit. We want all that alcohol in there to evaporate out of there. We want the flavor from the wine, but not the alcohol, because that can impart a bitter flavor. Now, if we're in a hurry, we can still dump it out because it's going to be cooking all day.
Okay.
And it's going to find its way out with the lid off. But when the lid's on, the alcohol finds its way to the lid and ends up back in.
Now, will that alcohol cook off in that long period of time in your crock pot, or that won't be enough heat for it?
It'll evaporate out eventually.
Okay.
So, but if the heat, if the lid's on, the alcohol can't escape.
Exactly.
It's staying right in there.
So then you can lick the top if you want. Nice glass of wine with your goulash.
Okay. Well, hopefully it never comes to that.
I hope not.
Okay. So now we're just going to add this in here. You see, cleaned off our pan. We're good to go.
So what's next in that pan?
Well, let's look and see what else we're going to rewind to in our recipe here. All right, so let's see what we're going to change. What else we're going to change on our recipe here? Our garlic, if we want to add our garlic flavor, we don't necessarily have to saute that off. So we're just going to add our garlic in here.
Okay, so in this case, the garlic's raw.
Exactly.
But it's still going to cook for, what'd you say, about 2-3 hours or more?
Well, this, with the size cubes that we have in here, I can set this on low. This is a meal that while I'm at work all day for like 8 hours, I can come home and find the meat still intact and not in a bunch of little pieces.
That's worth coming home for.
I would hope so. Yeah. And we're going to add our dry mustard. We'll leave that the same. Like the dry mustard. We'll also leave our cayenne pepper the same. Maybe a little less even on that one. Now, salt, we do need some salt in there. So we're going to add our salt right in here. And our sugar. We'll leave that alone. There are some things that we're not going to mess around with. And Worcestershire. We'll leave that the same.
But if you wanted to, you could switch those, correct?
Oh, exactly, exactly. And other things I could use actually are the tomato product. Our tomato product here is ketchup. But if I wanted to, we could add different tomato products. And
did somebody say different tomato products?
There you go. We take our here we have our plum tomatoes, which this time of year don't look that great. But if I have a dish that I want to do tomatoes in, all I have to do is cut them in half. I put them under the broiler. Well, that changes the flavor completely.
Yeah.
And if we want to, we can get really lazy. And we could use our other tomato product that we have hanging out here, which is a smoke roasted tomato. And this one, if you're on the run and in a hurry, it's a canned product. Fire roasted diced tomatoes. I like it in chili. It's got a lot of great uses. So in this particular recipe for goulash, though, I think I'm going to stay traditional and go with our ketchup here. But for many other dishes, I will go ahead and I'll change out and use a different tomato, depending on what we have. One change I do make, though, is in the paprika. I like a smoked paprika.
Okay.
It adds a real nice flavor to this dish. It just kind of jumps a little bit, and you know, it's too bad you can't smell it, but it does smell great.
It does. It does have the nice smoky aroma. Should I give this a quick stir for you?
Give it a stir. Actually, let's make it easier for it to stir.
Oh.
Remember our recipe called for which liquid?
Water.
Water. Well, let's add some beef stock. It's a beef flavored dish, so let's get more flavor in there.
See, now you're talking my language.
So there's the beef.
So now we actually were able to layer and compound our flavors a lot better than just that water would do, right?
Exactly. Now, we could also add some mushrooms. We have 3 different types of mushrooms here. We have our portobello mushrooms, which is finely sliced. And the mushrooms, we don't have to cook them ahead of time.
Okay.
Mushrooms cook fairly quickly, and they're going to have all day to cook. So I'm going to use these portobello mushroom slices. Just add those in there. I don't know if I want all of them. And I'm not worried about breaking them up as they cook. They'll break up during that process. But I also have some shiitake mushrooms, and these are kind of neat. We have some oyster mushrooms there. Maybe we'll just throw a few of those in there as well.
Why not?
A little more earthy flavor. And then more traditional shiitake mushrooms here. All of them are quite good. So now all we have to do is pop the lid on this, let this simmer out for about 8 hours on low, and we'll be good to go.
Did you say 8 hours?
Has it been 8 hours already?
I wish it were.
Well, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about when you come home, now you have to finish up this dish. And if you want to pour it over noodles, you want to make sure that it's a thickness that you can work with. And one of the easiest way to do that is work with a slurry. And actually, if you want to set that down here for me.
8 hours.
All right.
My time flies.
All right. And we can see in here, this is our finished product. All right. We can see our meat's in here. Nice and tender. How do we know it's tender? Well, that's tender. Kind of with a plastic
Is that a new thing, spoon tender as opposed to fork tender?
Well, you know, traditionally it is fork tender when checking for doneness, especially in a roast or something like a corned beef. So we have our cornstarch in here. We're just going to add enough cool liquid, and we're going to use water here to turn it into a pourable liquid, which we call a slurry. And we're going to stir this on up. And what we had to do is when you come home, if you're going to thicken it with a starch, cornstarch like this or arrowroot would be the same type of thickener. We turn this on high because unless it comes up to a full simmer, you see a little bit of bubbling going on there, you're not going to get the full thickness of it. So we're going to add in a little at a time and stir it as it goes in. Otherwise, it may get to the bottom and just stick there, make a big gooey mess, which we don't really want.
That's looking great. Can everyone see that? I can't smell it, but...
All right. And this is going to change your color a little bit, but we want it that really cling to our noodles instead of just all end up as a soup in the bottom of our bowl. And we'll finish up by putting that over noodles in just a little bit.
Absolutely. Now comes the best time, isn't that right, Chef Doug?
That's right, we get to plate up and we get to eat.
That is the best.
So now we tightened up our goulash with a little cornstarch. We'll just serve that right over our noodles here. Nice and hot. You see we've got the consistency that we wanted in our sauce. I always like a little extra sauce. Again, when you go on a tangent on a recipe, I like a little sauce, so I kind of usually do 1.5 times the sauce for a lot of recipes that I see on there. So then we have our goulash and our corned beef, 2 easy crock pot meals for anyone to put together, but made it a little better, a little easier for you to try and do this on your own.
It's all about technique, as of course you'll know by coming to visit us for a class, whether it be credit or non-credit, here at wonderful Mercer County Community College in West Windsor, New Jersey. We hope to see you soon.
Yeah, join us here at the Culinary Center, take a non-credit class. We'd love to have you come and play in our kitchens. We like playing here.
Oh, absolutely.
Join us again for another edition of Dish It Out. We look forward to seeing you. Take care.